So thank you everyone for the very nice welcome, and thank you for joining my talk. This talk is all about how we as a team improved our monitoring so that everyone likes to be on call in the end. Yeah, what can you expect out of this talk? First, we talk about what on-call should not be and how you can improve it to fix it, and so that in the end, you or your engineers like to take over the on-call duty with pleasure. And furthermore, I will show you like the journey me and my team took to overcome some obstacles and how you can build up a sustainable on-call system in general. Short about me, my name is Daniel. I'm working at T-Systems Multimedia Solutions. I have a passion for Linux and open source, and here is my Twitter handle and my blog URL if you want to reach out to me after the conference. So, what we are working on as a team, we maintain several customer services, meaning that our monitoring is very distributed for multiple customers, and that that way we need to like context switch a lot. That means, on the other hand, we quickly need to adapt on customer needs and change the environment quickly. So I hope this gave you a good starting point from where we come from. So we have no in-house development of our own applications. We maintain applications for customers. Maybe a short question just out of curiosity. How many of you are on a regular basis on call? Quite a few. And how many are right now? I feel you. Okay. So let's start with the initial situation, which was or is pretty bad. Maybe you've already heard some of the following quotes, like, I didn't sign up for this, or why should I take over the on-call duty? I thought someone else will do this for us. And my personal favorite is, if you haven't debugged the live database at 3 AM in the morning, you're not a real developer. And there's a lot what we can learn from these statements, because on-call can be really disrespecting, like I showed you. It can impact your sleep. Maybe you have no sleep at all. It impacts your personal lives, your family lives, your hobbies. Maybe you have a lot of flappy alerts, which will drive you crazy in the end, or your engineers don't have some training at all on how to fix a real outage. And if you don't take care of these steps or of these things, every check will alert you in the end. Now, we in our team weren't necessarily toxic, but we still had a few of the above issues as well. So what was our initial situation in the beginning? Well, we had a lot of false positive checks on any given time. We had some lack of detailed monitoring for some sub-processes or applications. We had even lack of experience on a real outage because some new colleagues joined to the team, and we've missed sharing knowledge on some point or had no runbooks for some stuff. And every goddamn alarm alarmed us on any given time. And that resulted in wakeful nights and scared junior engineers with a resting pulse rate of 180 beats per minute. And I can tell you that because I've been there and I've already done that, and it's not fun. And we've managed to change it, and I want to tell you how we've accomplished it. So in order to keep like some track of our process, I've used these simple smileys to represent our emotions as engineers. And we are currently the sad smiley, so that means we are slowly burning out due to our heavy on-call duty, and like we only do firefighting. And in the following slides, I want to share the learnings and our first steps that we took to toggle down these problems. It is important to keep in mind that our ultimate goal is like not to never get notified again, because this would be like a 100% secure, hardened application. It won't happen at all. Because the thing is, we will never get rid of all the false alarms or the failures. And this is not the right goal either, because as an engineer, it is like more exhausting to get a false alarm for a component you don't know something or anything about than a real alarm for something you know about. So our goal here should be like about things we can influence to increase the health of our application in the end. So starting off with the real first problem, every check alarmed us. on any given time. And for this problem, we've had like two approaches. The first one was that we as a team figured out the truly business critical checks for our customers. And after that, we've implemented like two hotlines. So we've implemented the 24/7 on-call hotline, the classic one, and the 9 to 5 hotline. And we separated the checks in those two hotlines, and that way we had lesser calls in the nights without that much effort. But don't get me wrong, we have still too many checks. And the second approach was that we've like deleted every information-only check because they were just useless. We never used them for debugging or anything else. And our learnings here were like really delete every check without any meaningful information for you. If you ignore it, just remove it. And not all checks are truly business critical. So please set the bar really high for waking people up at 2 a.m. in the morning. And your paging alerts, if you maintain like several monitoring solutions like Isinga or a Grafana with Alert Manager and so on, should only come from one source to just avoid confusion of where they come from. Another problem we've had was the lack of detailed monitoring. Well, for some applications or components, there were only like an end-to-end check or HTTP check, and that's not enough. And we've also needed to monitor some sub-processes to figure out what is broken exactly and where in the processing chain. So our first step here was, like in the slide above, we figured out the business-critical components for our customers. And after that, we've just listed all the software in kind of a list and checked what we what we need to add on our monitoring to monitor all the sub-processes. And then we're like mostly two ways. The first one is like we've implemented new monitoring endpoints or interfaces in our software directly, or we just recycled them from other customers because we've used them already there and the components are kind of similar. And our big learning here is always think from your customer's perspective first, and it's even better to talk with them what is crucial for their business. But with all the applications you might maintain, there comes the responsibility to prevent outages, or if you have an incident, to fix it quickly and sustainably. And here we had another problem. Some colleagues of us lacked on experience for real outage. And maybe you remember your first on-call situation where your thoughts were like, oh my God, what happens if I don't get this solved by now? What will my colleagues think? What will my customers think? And so on. And often such thoughts come from improper preparation. And don't get me wrong, it's not your fault if you have these thoughts. It's just you missed out as a team, and you can just try to solve it later on. And for this, we had this problem too in our team, and we had some approaches for it. So the first one was that an experienced colleague prepared like a short test with all the monitoring things that could happen, and we as new colleagues tried to solve them. And after that, we've just collected all our solutions and wrote down some documentation, which was missing at this point, and we even fixed some quick wins, which was pretty nice too. And the second approach is that you have an on-call buddy on your first weeks of on-call if you're new to a team. So someone who's responsible for you, someone who you can call in the middle of the night and start crying. And our learnings here are remember to brief, like in every difficult life situation. Check if the alert has some linked documentation on it, and if not, create it, obviously. And the biggest obstacle to overcome is fear in the beginning. And another great thing for outage simulation is chaos engineering. Chaos engineering came up in 2010, where Netflix introduced a tool called Chaos Monkey. And with this tool, admins were able to cause random failures on random intervals at random places in their systems. And this testing approach made Netflix cloud-based system much more resilient to faults in the future. And maybe you've already heard about failure testing in this context, but there are quite some differences. Because failure testing is like to check if a single condition is true or false, and such a check breaks the system in a preconceived way, so you kinda already know the outcome. And case engineering, on the other hand, is all about generating new knowledge about your system, so you have like an unpredictable outcome on a much broader scope. Speaking of testing, the next point is maybe sounds a bit scary at first, but it's important to break our like classic old behaviors to become faster and more reliable when it comes down to deployment. Speaking of testing in production, like do not overinvest in your staging systems and underinvest in your production system, because most bugs will only ever be found with production traffic. And there are like several ways to do it. For example, if you maintain your own application, you could add a stable and a beta or experimental branch to let your users choose like what they would want to use, and that way you have some real world user traffic on your application, and but the user can switch back to a stable branch if something's horribly wrong. And the other thing is like you can use feature flags to turn on or off a feature if your application starts to break. And the thing is, staging systems are still solid for many things, but I think when it comes down to feature deployments, we should go away from the old classic behavior, deploy to stage, use your QA team to test it without any real traffic, then deploy to production, and boom, you have a bug because there's the first contact with real traffic. So, yeah, don't get me wrong, there are still several good ways for staging systems. Now away from like bugs and environments towards another important topic, because we as a team figured out that we need to keep track of our paging alerts in some way, because otherwise you may end with some kind of apathy, or in other talks they use the phrases alerting fatigue if a check calls you like more than once. And that way you should like measure your paging alerts, because we as a team had like no statistics or values in the beginning, especially for those calls out of hours. So we started to track them down, we started even graph them, and we've talked about our paging alerts in our daily stand-up, because usually that's the meeting where everyone of our team is around. If you don't do it, you will lose track of your frequency, and that's not good. And that leads me to another important point, like qualitative tracking. Besides measuring your paging alerts, you should keep track of some other important things, so to speak, if you are on the right path of your improvement journey. So you should track things you can do, not things you hope that they don't happen. And your success in this journey should not about having no incidents at all. It should be more about how confident people feel to take over the on-call duty. And that leads me to another point. Ask your engineers, because that is the best qualitative feedback to ensure you're on the right path. And even if you're still missing someone, your engineers will call or will say it to you. And despite all the preparations and work, there's like no way around an incident, right? So what do you then do then? It happened, you have an incident, everything is on fire, like in this picture, and the good starting point after you fixed it, or even when you're fixing it right now, is a blameless postmortem. And there you talk about what happened and what needs to be done to fix it for the good, so that the same error won't occur twice. And after you've already discussed about the technical difficulties and you've added issues to your Kanban board or something, you should give your engineers the time to fix them. You should prioritize them over your daily business tickets or above your feature requests, because it's important that the same error won't occur twice. We've improved. We are finally the mediocre Smiley, because we went from firefighting to active engagement. And we even find bugs before our customers report them, which is a good thing in general. And we've climbed out of the pit, and we'll get paged less and less. So our engineers right now feel much happier, but there's still some place for improvement. So what else can we do? And one thing we thought that could help us was predictive alarming. And what I mean with predictive alarming are like checks that call you before something happens. Like right now the disk is full at 80%. In 20 hours it is 100%, and this is critical. And we slowly forgot about them because you should only alert when users are in real pain. And deleting them reduced some information-only checks for us, so meaning that we had a cleaner monitoring in the end. So we stopped living the dream of predictive alarming. Maybe it works for you, but not in our journey. And another big problem or question was like, who takes care of the monitoring? Because currently everyone has always done a little something, but no one ever has really felt committed to it. And to change it, we've assigned like a role to take care of our monitoring during the office hour. We are not that creative, so we've called it the Encore Role. I know it's not that creative, but this role had some specifications to it. The role should like fix quick wins if there are some. So tickets that occur or monitoring tickets that occur that are lesser than 15 minutes work time. The role should create tickets for occurring critical checks if they are not solvable right now. And the role should give the colleagues status about the current state of our monitoring. And we've did this in our daily stand-up as well. Maybe at this point you ask yourself the question, what happens on like on-call rotation? And we've designed a process for that as well. So we've designed this process to transfer the on-call duty so that the previous on-call buddy just cleaned up every monitoring queue, cleaned up the monitoring and checks if there are some old notifications left. And as an example, could look like you just create a 15-minute meeting or something like that, and the previous on-call colleague just sit down with the future on-call buddy, and they talk again about all the events that week happened. And even recalling major changes is a good way to be prepared in the end. I've already used this phrase above, align engineering pain with your user's pain. So a good way to approach that thing is like migrating away from the event-based system, event-based monitoring to an SLO-based monitoring, and using the SRE approach to adopt alerting best practices. Some of them I've already talked about. And if you follow some of these guidelines and track down your pain in the end and pay it down, you really gain profit at the end. And if you use SLO-based monitoring, ideally your SLO is like a precise definition of an unimpacted user experience. So in other words, symptom-based alerts are usually alerts on active violations of your SLO. So maybe you remember our initial situation. We are finally the happy smiley. And that's because our on-call is now like compatible with our private lives, with our families. It is something we enjoy while doing it because it has some real value to us. We've deleted the alerting fatigue, or tried to. It is rarely sleep disturbing. For sure, you can't get rid of all the false positives or all the incident monitoring messages, but that's not our goal, like I said in the first slides. And it is something you might volunteer for because it's some easy money now. Other than that, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. I'm a bit, I have quite some time. Thank you for your time, and I wish you the nice rest of the conference. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Test, test. What is SLO-based monitoring?
SLO is like a service level objective. It comes from the SRE approach. So you have like not the event-based monitoring. The event-based monitoring is something like, yeah, the disk is full, I just push out the event. And the SLO-based monitoring is like, you just sat down with your customers and you've discussed what are the SLOs in your specific case, and after that you've like said, okay, we've measured like multiple checks or only one check, and if the threshold is already reached, we set out an alarm like that. I don't know how to describe it better right now, really.
Okay, thank you. Good talk, by the way.
Sorry.
We'll go right side first.
Hi. How do you inject a failure in a production environment? And how does it improve your resolution times? I mean, is it control?
Can you repeat the first phrase?
Yeah. When doing chaos engineering, you said you injected failures into production environments to see what happens and how people react. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, how do you select what are you going to break? How do you break it without some other people knowing, etc.?
So of course, there are some tools like Chaos Monkey, like the one that Netflix used, and you can use such tools like the one who's using it already know the outcome. But if this tool started like blocking ports or something, or just shut down like your web server, as an example, the other ones that should solve the problem don't know what this tool did to the system. So of course there's already one person who knows what this tool like just did to your system, but if you have multiple colleagues that try to solve it, there are still some that don't know.
Thank you.
Yourself go again.